Welcome to today's episode, a deep dive reflection on destruction, building, and planting, a podcast series by Pastor Lynch of Trinity Baptist Church. This series is a deep dive of Pastor Lynch's sermon and podcast concerning these Old Testament passages. He puts it in today's language. Pastor Lynch opens up the prophetic words of Jeremiah, not as ancient history, but as urgent, relevant insight for today's world. Through themes of destruction, rebuilding, and renewal, he walks us through the difficult but necessary process of confronting what's broken in our lives, our communities, and even our churches. What struck me most? It's how he names our collective trauma, from global crises to personal losses, and still holds space for hope. There's a refreshing honesty here, paired with a deep theological grounding. He's not afraid to bring up the old struggles we'd rather ignore, but he also refuses to leave us there. There's always a next step, a call, a purpose. Whether you're going through something tough right now or you're just hungry for deeper spiritual reflection, this is a series worth your time. I encourage you to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with thoughtful, faith-rooted content like this.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. You know, when we look around the world right now, it can feel overwhelmingly chaotic.
It really can.
From personal curveballs like a car accident or the devastating loss of a loved one, something we felt acutely in our community recently with the passing of Paul and the Kennedys.
Difficult times.
And then there are these massive collective traumas like the pandemic that just reshaped all our lives.
Completely.
And now you hear about potential conflicts simmering. Europe, Southern Asia, the Middle East. That sense of national, even global trauma, maybe like many of us remember from 9/11 back in 2001, it really hits home. It makes you wonder, how do we navigate all this constant state of upheaval?
It's true. And that feeling you described, that pervasive sense of trauma, it really does echo through history. And today we're going to dive into the profound insights of the prophet Jeremiah. He's, an ancient voice who spoke directly into a world that was utterly shattered.
Jeremiah.
Yeah. His time, specifically 587 BCE, before the Common Era, saw the total destruction of Jerusalem. And we're talking about not just buildings, but their entire social fabric.
Wow.
The government, their religious life, and really critically the temple, which they understood as God's actual house among them.
God's house. Gone.
Gone. And this deep dive material, it actually compares 587 BCE to the ancient Israelites' 9/11.
That's a stark comparison.
It is. Most valuable citizens were exiled, taken to Babylon, and Jeremiah, known as the weeping prophet, he was left behind. But he cried, not for himself, but for his people. He apparently experienced these profound, alternating moods, despair, then exaltation, grappling with this incredibly difficult task, facing relentless persecution.
That's a powerful connection to our own times, actually. It sounds like Jeremiah was truly thrown into the deep end right from the start, tasked with these, incredibly challenging messages. What does this material tell us about his initial calling? Because I understand the language God uses with him is, remarkably intimate.
Oh, it's striking, isn't it? The material highlights his unique call, probably around 627 BCE, in the 13th year of Judah's King Josiah.
Oh.
And God speaks these words directly to Jeremiah. Before I came to you in the room, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I made you a prophet to the nations.
Wow, before you were born.
Exactly. Yet, despite this incredible divine affirmation, Jeremiah's first reaction is basically, not me, God. No way. I'm just a baby.
Yeah.
He felt completely inadequate, even though he was probably in his late teens or early 20s.
So not literally a baby, but feeling like one.
Right, feeling unqualified. But God's response is so profound. He basically says, you are right. You are too young. You are unqualified, but I'm with you. I've called you. Here, and this is amazing, take my words literally into your mouth.
So God doesn't dismiss his feelings?
No, not at all. It's more like an affirmation of God's presence and empowerment despite the inadequacy. God says, yes, you feel that, but I am with you.
Okay. And what was happening historically around then? You mentioned King Josiah.
Right. So contextually, King Josiah was seen as this dramatically good king. He even rediscovered the Torah scroll, a huge moment.
Right.
But after his reign, not so good kings followed. And this led to escalating Babylonian invasions around 600 BCE, then again in 597 BCE, and then culminating in that devastating final destruction in 587 BCE we talked about.
So Jeremiah saw all of this unfold.
He lived through it all, and eventually he found himself kidnapped, taken to Egypt, and that's where he likely finished his life.
Incredible. So he lives through all that, and he's given this incredibly challenging mission that starts, kind of surprisingly, with destruction.
Mm-hmm.
When I first read Jeremiah 1:10, you know that verse where God tells him, "This very day I appoint you over nations and empires to dig up and pull down, to destroy and demolish, to build and to plant."
Mm-hmm.
The sheer emphasis on destruction, 4 verbs of taking down versus only 2 of building, that really struck me. What does this material say about why? Why that imbalance?
Yeah, that's really the core insight, isn't it? This material really emphasizes that we just cannot rush to the building and planting parts.
Okay.
The digging up and pulling down, the deconstruction, the dismantling, all that is absolutely essential groundwork. Think about driving past a construction site.
Right. Looks like chaos.
Total chaos, exactly. Trees cleared, roots ripped up, massive mounds of dirt everywhere. It looks like an absolute mess. But it's a necessary destruction, right? To prepare for the new building, for planting whatever's new.
Necessary destruction.
Yeah. And spiritually, this study connects it directly to the Apostle Paul's teaching, that idea that we have to kind of die to our old lives, be crucified with Christ before God can truly bring new life. It's that prerequisite dismantling that allows for real transformative rebuilding.
Okay, that makes sense. And part of that deconstruction, according to this material, involves facing some, really tough truths, especially around the idea of sin. It's a word, our society often shies away from. But this discussion doesn't seem to pull any punches when talking about God's judgment. How does the material help us understand what sin means here, particularly this concept of the sin of sameness?
Yeah, it's a powerful concept and maybe uncomfortable for many of us today, but it seems crucial to understanding why deconstruction might be needed. This deep dive talks about both individual sins, like the prophet Nathan confronting King David about Bathsheba.
Right, that classic story.
Exactly. But it also talks about collective or systematic sins. And this sin of sameness is presented as the societal tendency we have to ignore God-given diversity and differences.
What kinds of differences?
Things like race, ethnicity, age, language, different life experiences. The idea is we actively try to block from our eyes differences and seek to all be the same. And the material frames this as a kind of modern echo of Babel. You remember the Tower of Babel story?
Vaguely, yeah. Everyone speaking one language.
Right. And God scattering the peoples and languages, the source presents that not as a punishment, interestingly, but as a corrective gift for diversity.
A gift. That's a different take.
It is. So the idea is, for God's good news and kingdom to truly take root, sometimes the old structure needs to be removed. Every bit of growth in the garden, metaphorically speaking, might need to be plowed under to make way for new life. It reminds me of Simeon's prophecy about Jesus in the New Testament, how he was set apart for the falling and rising of many in Israel. Sometimes things genuinely have to fall before they can truly rise again, renewed.
Falling and rising.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating and, provocative idea. So after all this heavy talk of destruction, judgment, falling, we pivot to hope, a profound message of hope. How does the material characterize this hope? Especially when it says it's not our way, but God's way.
Yeah, this is where the profound shift happens. The hope that emerges through Jeremiah, it isn't just, optimism. It's not a sentimental, feel good, everything will be okay kind of harmony.
Okay, not just wishful thinking.
No, this material describes it as something deeper. An unbidden, unexpected revelation of God's divine love. And crucially, it has to come God's way, not our way. It's a deep, foundational hope that undergirds everything, even the destruction.
God's way.
Yeah. Eugene Peterson, who's quoted in this deep dive, puts it so powerfully. He says something like, "We are known before we know. We enter a will we didn't create. We grow into a life that's already provided for us. We are living in the middle of a story that was begun and will be concluded by somebody else, somebody we call God. It's God's story."
Wow. It's God's story. That takes the pressure off us a bit, maybe?
In a way, yes. It reframes our struggles. So even when we feel like our strength is totally used up, as the psalmist says in a passage quoted here.
Which passage is that?
It's one where the psalmist cries out, "Because you are my hope, Lord, I've trusted in you since my childhood. Don't cast me off in old age. Don't abandon me when my strength is used up."
When my strength is used up, that's relatable.
Very. And the comfort offered is that even then, especially then, God is present. God is our shelter amidst our physical and spiritual dangers, our rock of refuge, our rock and our fortress. That transforming, enduring love is the ultimate hope. It's not dependent on our strength or our plans.
So bringing this all together,
Yeah.
what does this mean for us listening right now? This deep dive into Jeremiah, looking at it through this lens of trauma, it seems to teach us that while destruction and judgment, well, they can be uncomfortable, even necessary precursors sometimes. They are never God's final word.
Never the final word.
The promise is always, ultimately, to build and to plant anew, and it's powered by this unwavering divine love that's always there, even in the rubble.
Exactly. And that leaves us maybe with a provocative thought to just sort of ponder. Consider what structures in your own life. Maybe old habits, outdated beliefs, perhaps even certain societal norms that we take for granted. Or in the wider world around you, what might need to be dug up and pulled down.
What needs dismantling?
Right. Before something genuinely new, something truly transformative and hopeful can actually take root and begin to build and plant. It makes you reflect, doesn't it? What does it mean for us to return to waiting and watching, even as we experience all the chaos of living in the now, but also holding on to the not yet of God's kingdom, living in that tension?
Waiting and watching in the now and not yet. A lot to think about there.